Hey guys, today I am reviewing the TideWe 270 degree see-through hunting blind, and you may be wondering why I am starting this video while taking it to the spot that we're going to hunt. And my reason is my usage of hunting blinds these days often is it's a day it's going to rain, or a day that it's going to snow, chance of rain, chance of snow, whatever it may be. And it's a spur of the moment decision. I want to hunt. I can't get my camera wet. I don't want to get soaked sitting there all day. So I take a blind. So the first step of this review is going to basically be seeing how easy it is to carry in. It's a hub blind. Hub blinds are a little heavier than doghouse blinds generally, but I've got about 25 pounds of camera gear on my back, plus the blind, plus my bow, plus the chair. It's not too bad. I'm not exactly a bodybuilder. I'm like 5'9", 140. If I can do it, you can probably do it. Now, as I'm sure most of you already know, blind placement is absolutely crucial, especially when you're going to hunt out of it the day that you set it up. You're naturally going to have something out of place, and you want to make it look as in place as possible. So up under these two hemlocks, we got all these branches to help break up our outline. Got these big trees here to help just kind of hide us. And I think we're in about the right spot as far as being in bow range. So I've already kicked all the leaves out of the way so we're not making noise in the blind stepping on them. And I imagine most of you guys are familiar with hub blinds already, but for those of you that aren't, they're very simple to set up. Basically, we're going to take this here, we're going to set it down on this end and open it up so we got the roof facing up. This is about the only part that's difficult with one person. You have to get a little bit of tension on these poles. You're going to grab the little strap that allows you to open it up. When you have that tension, pop that open. That's about the only thing that's tough with one person. The rest are going to open up really, really easy. And what you're seeing here is the back. This is the one side that you can't see through. We're gonna want that in the direction we're least likely to shoot. And for us, it's gonna be straight down the hill. So we gotta rotate it about 180 degrees. Generally, I just get inside the blind, pick it up, spin it around, no big deal. And already, we're almost done. We need to brush this in. Any blind should be brushed in before you hunt out of it. You can use these brush pockets here, put some limbs in it. It doesn't matter if you have the best camo pattern out there. You're not going to hide something this big from being out of a place in the eyes of a deer. So you stick some limbs, some brush, get that big outline broken up into a bunch of smaller outlines, and suddenly it's much harder to detect. And after that, we'll be ready to go. Don't forget as well, there's brush pockets on top. Also, try not to block the windows with the brush, otherwise you gotta move it once you get in the blind. I think this is gonna work. You'll notice I spent most of my time at the front and the front corners. That's because the directions I expect the deer to come from, that's the angles they should see the blind from. Plus the sides are pretty well hidden already here in these trees. It's going to depend on your specific setup as to how you want to do that, but I think we're set to go. I should mention as well, there are stakes and tie downs that come with this blind. It is a completely calm day. I'm not planning on leaving this blind here overnight, or if I do, I'll stake it down after dark. So I'm not going to do that right now. I want to jump in the blind and hopefully be ready before when the deer come here. So now I want to show you what we can see from in here and just how see-through this fabric is. But before I do, I want to show you how these windows work and just how brilliantly they're designed. You can really customize exactly what you need for your hunt, gun, bow, crossbow, whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the main features I like about this blind. I haven't had any others that are like this. So basically, there's two different panels. You have the top and the bottom, and you can see the seam going along here. You can lower the bottom down as much as you want on these little slides at any level, or you can raise the top up, which in a spot like this makes a huge difference. We're downhill, so we're going to be shooting up. This will need to be out of the way, but a lot of this can help add cover. Makes a huge difference. It's one of my favorite features of this blind.
As we take a look through the see-through mesh, let's talk about the price. This blind is listed at $159.99 on TideWe's website, but I've actually seen it on their Amazon page for $149.99. This price is comparable to other see-through blinds currently on the market, but it is approximately double the price of non-see-through hub blinds that are out there.
It's pretty cool, and I'll be honest, the camera can actually see through a little bit better even than I can, but it's a pretty good representation, and that's the thing, you don't need to see through it so well that you can make out every detail or see exactly how many points a buck has at 50, 60 yards. You know something's coming, you can see that glimpse of movement through this material, and you know to look. That's one of the things that, for forever, I hated about hunting out of ground blinds. Either you sit here and make so much movement, non-stop looking through every window, to a point it almost starts to defeat the purpose. Or you get surprised when a deer appears in front of one of the windows. This solves that problem. You can, from any angle, catch a glimpse of something moving under the windows, through one of the corners, typically where in a ground blind you couldn't see it. And quite frankly, it's enough to make me want to use a blind again. They're so portable, you can hunt literally anywhere you set them up. And especially, you set them up 3-4 days ahead of time, deer get used to it, it can make a heck of a difference. So now we're on to the last part of the test. Will the deer see us in here? And we may find out today, we may not. Depends if the deer come through. It's fall turkey season too. This is actually a good spot for them, so we'll see how we do. Well, there's been nothing but squirrels moving so far, and we're down to about 30 minutes of light, but I wanted to show you this as well because when I first saw blinds like this advertised 2-3 years ago, I thought that the see-through aspect would only apply in perfect ideal lighting conditions. And as light starts to fade here, I want you to see that that's not the case. It's a little bit harder to see through, but hardly to the point where you wouldn't see that movement behind the see-through mesh that I talked about.
Finally, at last light, I did have a deer walk through, and while it never noticed the blind, it was just a young deer. I felt that it wasn't a definitive enough test for just how well the deer can't see in the blind when looking through the see-through fabric, so I'd return a few days later in the snow and ended up having the exact same results. The deer paid me no mind whatsoever, but again, it was just a young one. In the end, I ended up taking the blind rifle hunting and finally was able to encounter an adult deer at relatively close range. This encounter finally provided what I was looking for as he walked right by the blind. It was this extra time in rifle season that allowed me to sit in the very type of weather I mentioned at the start. The rain had been falling for a few hours at this point, and the only water inside the blind was the condensation from our breathing, checking the last box that I consider most important for a ground blind. So to wrap up, let's talk about pros and cons, and I'll start with the cons as I think that is a shorter list. And the first one is just simply the cost. $150 is a bit steep for a ground blind, however, it can barely even be called a con here, as this is the typical price for a see-through ground blind. If you're like me and can't stand the limiting feeling that most blinds create, you may consider this a worthwhile investment. Next on my list is only when it's raining heavily, as this will cause water to drip from the roof to the inside of the blind on all four sides. However, I can barely call that a con of this particular blind either. All hub style blinds do this as the center of the wall sticks out beyond the roof. That said, if you've never used a hub blind, it's probably worth noting. And lastly, the biggest one, just the entire non-see-through panel. The window was just simply not big enough for my liking, specifically when rifle hunting. Oftentimes when bow hunting, it's possible to pick a side that you're just not likely to shoot from, and even leave the window closed, to keep it darker inside the blind, hiding you further. But with a rifle, I just felt the back panel was limiting, not only with the window size, but the door size as well. It's perfectly fine if it's just you and a gun or bow, but if you're carrying a backpack or anything on top of that, it becomes a little difficult to squeeze in, and the zipper is a little loud due to the hub style approach that stretches the material. I also would have liked some sort of additional clip on the door to hold it open to use that as a window, specifically on nicer days when the weather allows for it. However, it wouldn't be that hard to fashion something for that myself. Now onto the pros, and we'll start with the window design. I really do think it's brilliant. You didn't get to see me take advantage of it as much because I typically open the windows all the way to allow myself to film without obstruction. However, if I didn't bring the camera, I really think being able to keep the windows to the specific size you need for your hunt is a great design, and it gives this blind more utility in more situations. As for the see-through fabric itself, it functions just as advertised even in low light. I could see out, but the deer couldn't see in. Now, in my opinion, the weight and size of this blind are a pro. I listed the weight on screen, and depending on how much weight you're willing to carry in, you could consider it a con, but as I mentioned in the beginning, I had no trouble even with an additional 30 pounds of gear, packing this blind into my hunting location. Much like the list of cons, I am considering the setup and takedown a pro, but it is more general to hub blinds. They're just great for being very quick to set up and take back down, and this one is no different. And lastly on the list of pros, comfort. I spent probably 50 hours in this blind over the course of a number of hunts, and generally was quite comfortable. I did find that the wind seems to find its way through the see-through sides a bit more than a non-see-through blind, but I think that's somewhat expected. The roof though kept the interior dry, and the footprint allows for enough space to be comfortable for all-day sits. So to wrap up, I'll always prefer tree stands when possible. However, this blind really took away most of the negative sides of ground blinds for me. Being able to see almost any direction just with my eyes and not needing to turn my head all the time, as well as keeping me hidden from the deer I encountered, certainly will have me back in this blind next season, particularly on hunts where I want to move to somewhere new. I'd like to thank TideWe for the opportunity to review their product, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Feel free to leave any questions you may have about my review below, and I'll do my best to answer those in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.